right, good morning. The Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order. Today is Friday, March 28th, 2025, and we do have a quorum present. Members, we have 34 bills on our agenda today. So we're going to encourage patience, succinctness, and focus on our jurisdiction in the committee so we don't go down too many rabbit holes other than setting the context for whatever provisions have brought the bill to this committee. So we're going to start out with Senate File 983, Senator Boldon. Welcome to Judiciary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am really grateful to be before you this morning with this bill. Senate File 983 is an appropriation for the Community Engagement Response Team in Rochester. And I will be brief and succinct because I really want you to hear from my testifiers to talk about this. But this, known as CERT team, plays really a critical role in our community in terms of fostering public safety, crisis intervention, community resilience. This team of volunteers has been working in our community with deep relationships in the areas that I just mentioned. They work directly with individuals facing housing insecurity, substance use challenges, mental health crises, our youth, and other vulnerabilities. They really have been an incredible resource for our community, and looking to extend them the resources they need to sustain that and to grow that in our community. I would direct members' attention to a couple of documents in your packet. There's one that gives sort of their annual review, kind of a description of their work. And then there are actually two packets of many letters and emails from community members who are talking about their excellent work in our community. So I really would encourage you to take time to take a look at some of those because they really are extensive. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would turn it over to testifiers.
Thank you, Senator Boldon. We have a couple of them on the line virtually as well. Did you have an idea who you wanted to start with? William Bud Whitehorn is.
Let's start with Mr. Whitehorn if we could, Mr. Chair.
On our list. Okay. So, Mr. Whitehorn, come on forward. Welcome to the Judiciary Committee. Have a seat there at the table next to Senator Boldon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You want to get home before it gets too hot in southern Minnesota today, right? So go ahead.
Yes,
if you just formally introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know.
I first want to say I'm humbled and both grateful and thankful for you guys seeing us today and seeing this bill. My name is William Bud Whitehorn. I'm Rochester's community liaison position. I accepted this position in January of 2001. The position was created to bridge the gap between the police, the law enforcement, and the blacks of the community. Post George Floyd, we knew that we needed to be proactive of trying to make sure that there wasn't an uproar if something happened there. But when we created this position in 2001, we knew we had to have a team effort to do some community work. We need to, there were some things in the community that needed to be done in order to be able to bridge some of these gaps with organizations as far as law enforcement and the county and also the city organizations. So we, later that year, we created, there was a murder of downtown Rochester. And after that murder, it was an uproar in the city, and it was a sense of uncommonness. So we knew we needed to take on that initiative, and we created the team, CERT, Community Engagement Response Team, which we handpicked several influential individuals of the city of Rochester through their influence in teaching and people that changed their lives from streets and also clergy and different areas of Rochester to use their influence to create change. And the first initiative was downtown for 4 months, and we wanted to shift the culture. Instead of people pulling out the cell phones and recording and going to social media, we wanted to create a safe zone. And we felt like that by the end of the summer, there was no arrest and no no other fights, and we created a culture downtown that people started caring for one another by giving real-life examples on how to care and love for one another. We was giving out free foods. We were gave out free haircuts. You look good, you feel good, you know. We were engaging with people every Friday and Saturday night. That was our first initiative. We later started going into the poverty pockets because we believe crime comes from poverty and despair. So we went into some of these poverty pockets, the apartment complexes, low-income housing, and we started to bring the resources to the people. We started to bring activities, events to the people. We wanted to. We had job fairs. We knocked on doors and asked the people what they needed instead of us bringing the people what we felt like they needed. We engaged with the people and started bringing them resources. We've started jail outreach. We started going into the jails and talking to people that were at bad times and hard times in their lives. So sometimes we were able to advocate, and we still do it, advocate for those individuals. And sometimes they just need somebody to talk to. And in order for a person in that position to be able to come back to society, they got to know that somebody care. So our jail outreach is still going to this day. We've given job resources. We give movie nights for the kids. We give out free foods, free haircuts. We get softball game with the community and the law enforcement. Most importantly, we have a lot of initiatives that bring the community through their trauma to have restorative circles with the police officers. We have planned. We have every 2 weeks we meet with local law enforcement, the captains and lieutenants, and talk about community issues. We are part of 911 calls to help through emergency situations. We've been very active in collaborating with law enforcement and any city and county organization throughout the city of Rochester. We've helped with the Olmsted County Fair, and Scott is here to testify that. Our partnership with RPS. Our goal is to attack any and every issue of the city of Rochester through community engagement and also relationship building.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehorn. Appreciate your testimony. We're going to go online now. We have Matt Ruzick. Mr. Ruzick, can you hear us?
I can. Can you all hear me?
Yes. If you go ahead and identify yourself and your affiliation, and then tell us what you'd like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me, and it is a privilege to not only be able to testify in front of you all, but to stand in support of not even just the organization, but the human beings that you all are sharing space with her today. And so when they asked if I'd be willing, I jumped at the opportunity. My name is Matt Ruzick. I am the proud principal of John Marshall High School here in Rochester, Minnesota. Prior to coming here, I've been here for 3 years. Prior to coming here, I was principal at Riverside Central Elementary School, which is located right across the street from our city hall and beautiful location and kids. And I had an opportunity to benefit from the partnership and collaboration with many of the employees and volunteers of the CERD organization. And I heard Bud reference, that crime or challenges come from poverty and despair, and I would echo that. But also I would share that I think oftentimes in my work in public education, this is my 25th or 6th year in public education here in Rochester, it comes from a lack of a relationship, trust, and authentic efforts to partner. And I've never seen a group of people more talented and more willing to put forth effort to develop those relationships. So the times that I've been able to benefit, when I say it, I'm able to benefit, I truly mean my family's students and staff have been able to benefit because of CERT they're really varied. Some of them have great depth and require immense amount of preparation. Others are in the moment, and this group of people are equipped and more than capable of handling either of those situations. The reason I referenced authentic relationship is a number of our students and families that we work with have not had a long history of successful relationship with, whether it be public servants, the school system, the police force, and it has changed dramatically in Rochester, due in large part to our partnership with the folks at CERT. Crystal, I can see her sitting there, and Bud. I've worked directly with both of them and Pastor Crockett as well, whether it was putting together some supports at recess at an elementary school. I know personally and have went personally with Crystal to many homes and sat at kitchen tables. We would have not have been afforded that opportunity had we not developed that relationship with CERT. Crystal has a Sisters Save Sisters program housed in our school. It is when you look at just the number of girls, it's seems small just looking at the number. The impact is immense. Crystal holds a standard and an expectation of excellence for our students. These are students who have not historically been told they can be excellent or given a pathway to show how to get to that level. She is as strict as they come, but that strictness comes with an immense amount of love and compassion. And that relationship takes years and years and years of practice. I think the cost, when I look at the investment in this organization, I couldn't fathom the cost of losing the students that we would lose if we did not have Crystal, Bud, and Andre and Lisa present. We will be very, very sorry, not just in regards to fiscal impact, but just community impact. We have folks now who readily come to us in regards to asking for support. Difficult conversations. Being a building principal, certainly we go through disciplinary actions with students. Many of our kids, and not just our black and brown kids, but any of our students in our building will say, can I have Auntie Crystal or Mr. Bud come over and sit with us in this meeting? Bud referenced restorative practices. We have a school resource officer here, Officer Gilbertson, who does a wonderful job, but we will lean on our relationship with Bud and Crystal to extend to the family. These are families that would not previously have felt comfortable or confident coming into our building. They readily come in now. They come in with the anticipation that there's going to be a positive change that occurs. And then
Mr. Rusick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to ask you to wrap this up so we have time for Mr. Schneider to testify as well, please.
I'm sorry, I have so much to say about these folks. I will do that. I just want to say that without a doubt, in all of my years of service in public education, I have yet to see a group of people who have had a greater impact on the students that I think nationally we want to help succeed. This group does it, and they do it voluntarily in many ways, and I feel like we would be missing a lot if we don't invest in them.
Thank you, Principal Rusick. Scott Schneider, go ahead and testify, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'd like to say it's been a pleasure to work with the CERT program and to watch them interact. I'm with the Olmsted County Fair. I've been the president the last 4 years, and we were having issues with the youth really acting up and causing disturbances to where there's almost a lot of families, the reputation was getting where they didn't feel safe coming to the fair. Bringing in the CERT team was even skeptical from the RPD and the Olmsted County Sheriff's Department at first, and it didn't take more than a day or two where they were coming up to me saying it was the greatest thing and enjoyed working with them. And I would watch groups of kids start to congregate, and that's when trouble's going to start to happen. And when the law enforcement would walk in there, it actually escalated. When CERT people walk in there, it said, "Oh, yes, Mr. Bud, yes, Mr. Andre, yes, Miss Lisa." There was so much respect. They listened to them and they talked to them, and it de-escalated. And we've actually turned our fair into one of the safest fairs. I have other fairs that call me and ask me how we did it. And I give full credit to the CERT program along with our local authorities working together. And it's a model for communities to really work together. And one of the things CERT taught me even is, at first we were trying to like get rid of the bad kids and push them out and whatever. And instead we've learned to include them, and inclusion has been our biggest recipe for success because the CERT team brought that. Not only include the kids so they feel a part of it, so they're not going to disrupt something they feel a part of, but also through the CERT program, we created our parking attendants or hirees that we hire through the CERT program, kids that are in their program that come and learn how to fill out paperwork. They get a job, and at the end of the week, they get a paycheck. And also through the graciousness of Gold Star Carnivals, they get free rides, and then we give them some free food. And some of these kids, it was amazing to me to see they had never been on a ride. They were more tickled about the tickets to go on free rides than they were their paycheck. But they really do a great job of showing these kids that there's another way to succeed in life. And it's just so, I'm very proud of it, of what our partnership with CERT, and I just think it's a model for every community, and I think not just Rochester, I think CERT should be expanded across every community.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Appreciate your testimony. Members, the intent is to lay this bill over for possible inclusion. Thank you all for your work that you're doing in the community and for coming forward to testify here today.
Thank you.
Senate File 983 is laid over. Senator Boldon, don't go too far. Senate File 832. Members, the intent is to have this bill moved on to state and local government. And we do have limited jurisdiction on this bill. Section 15, 16, and 17, and 18 to 20, and 22 to 23. So this is a big bill, and there's some specific lines here. So maybe what I'll just do is tell you so you can make a note in front of you. Lines 12.14 to 14.2, line 17.6, and all of sections 18 to 20 and 22 to 23. Then we believe there are some lines in section 16 as well. So let's start out with Senator Boldon giving us a brief context for the bill, and we have some people available to answer questions, is what I understand as well. Senator Boldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. If this bill and language looks familiar to you, it should. I would just remind the committee that this contains the same language that this Judiciary Committee adopted last year. This bill passed 66-0 off the Senate floor last year. However, it just did not make it through conference committee. So this bill briefly is the Certified Midwife Act. It's a bipartisan bill in both bodies. Really looking to add another pathway to midwifery. We know in the U.S. and in Minnesota, we have a maternal health crisis causing high levels of maternal morbidity and mortality. We know that we have stark racial disparities, and there are large areas of greater Minnesota that are considered maternity care deserts. And so this bill, this certified midwife licensure, is an evidence-based strategy that we can implement in Minnesota to expand our midwifery workforce, increase its diversity, and help address maternity care deserts. I'll just add that certified midwives are not new to the United States. They are practicing in 12 other states already. The number was 11 when we heard this last year, so other states are doing this even as we speak. Really just adds another pathway to get folks into this career. What you see before you, and specifically the portions that are relevant to this committee, mirror the nurse midwife practice, and so it just puts it in line with that other path to midwifery. The scope is the same, and so the penalties are the same as well. So and we do have folks online for technical questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Primo, would you care to give us a little guidance as to what exactly we're focusing on here today?
Mr. Chair and members, I think it would be section 15, section 17, and sections 18 to 20 and 22 to 23. All of these provisions have some sort of privacy element, data practices, some sort of element regarding immunity, both for civil and criminal, and also have some issues that are more so within Mr. Backus's area, maybe regarding collateral consequences.
Mr. Mr. Pappas?
Mr. Chair and members, I will also point out that on lines 20.7 and 20.8, there's a gross misdemeanor penalty.
Give members a chance to take a look at these provisions. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this time? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Boldon, if I could direct you to page 12, line 14. In that portion, it talks of conviction of a felony-level criminal sexual offense. The question I had is if someone was convicted of a gross misdemeanor in this category, would that individual still be allowed to get a license for midwifery?
Senator Boldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Limmer, for the question. So as you know, this section is conviction of a felony-level criminal sexual offense. I may turn to my support for questions online. I also will just note, though, that this is the same language as for certified nurse midwives. We're just opening up this new path for certified midwives, but would see if perhaps one of my backups have an answer to that question.
Ma'am, go ahead and come on forward. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Julie Sabo. I'm a clinical nurse specialist, and I'm the immediate past president of the APRN Coalition. I provided technical assistance for this bill in writing it, and it is exactly the same as the Nurse Practice Act now. So I can't speak to if it was a gross misdemeanor, but this is what is in place for nurses and other APRNs, specifically in this case, certified nurse midwives.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Limmer.
I just had a curiosity about why we only recognize felonies. And gross misdemeanor and felony, that depends on what the individual is convicted for, or if there was a plea bargain and the original felony charge was reduced to a gross misdemeanor. And you say that it's the same as nurse midwife law.
Correct.
So, okay. I don't think I have other questions, but I was curious. I don't think I got the answer, but nevertheless, we'll just keep pondering this as this proceeds. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion from members of the committee? I'm not seeing any. Senator Oumou Verbeten, your motion. Senator Oumou Verbeten moves that Senate File 832 be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Senate Committee on State and Local Government. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. All right, Senator Boldon, Senate File 2847.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My last bill before you, I'm appreciative to bring it to you. Senate File 2847. I do, Mr. Chair, have an amendment, if anyone would be so kind as to move that. I will just say, regarding the amendment, the forms revisions presented in this bill were required from legislation last year that modernized and improved Minnesota's garnishment processes. The change processes had an effective date of April 1st of this year. These are the forms that are before you today, and I will talk just a little bit more about those. But this amendment requires that the forms be active on Minnesota courts' website and in use in Minnesota courts by June 1st of this year, and aligns the date for adopting the new garnishment process accordingly. It also sets a retroactive date to provide for the possibility that the forms are approved by April 1st.
All right, members, this is the first committee stop for the bill. The intent is to send it to the floor from here. Commerce Committee has waived jurisdiction on it. And this is an author's amendment. So Senator Oumou Verbeten moves adoption of the A1 author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Senator Boldon, I see you have, is this Mr. Hartz from the Attorney General's office?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just say just a couple more words
course, please.
about the bill,
Senator
the underlying bill. Just to say that hard-to-understand forms are one of the most pervasive annoyances we all face. They can also have serious consequences if people make mistakes on them when the stakes are high. For example, when they are dealing with financial problems that lead to garnishment. The changes in the garnishment processes last year meant that the forms would have to be altered, so we took the opportunity to improve usability by incorporating principles of plain language into the revision processes. And so this bill brings forward the results of that work. As required, the Attorney General's office led a process with stakeholders from across the garnishment processes, the courts, attorneys, banks, employers, consumers, advocacy groups. That core team included a specialist in plain language. 3 types of content changes were needed: updating exemptions, updating definitions, and incorporating new wage garnishment tiers. And then once that was done, the plain language revisions were made. Finally, the subject matter experts signed off on the forms, confirming that the content of the forms was unchanged. If people are interested, I'm happy to go through some examples of that increased readability and organization.
Senator Boldon, why don't we leave that if there are any questions at this point?
That's fair. I also, lastly, would just direct members' attention to a letter in your packets from a wide variety of all of the stakeholders who were part of this process in support of this. And so really, we're just hoping to make this easier for consumers.
Senator Boldon, I see you have 2 testifiers there. Testifiers, if you're just concurring that stakeholders are all in agreement, maybe you can just say that, and we'll see if there are any committee discussion.
Senator Latz, I think I can speak for myself and Mr. Carlson. That's what we're both doing here.
And you're Mr. Hartz?
Just here to answer questions if there are any about the bill, sir.
Okay, so but you're here on behalf of the Attorney General's office, is that correct?
Yes, I should have confirmed that up front, yes.
Okay. Mr. Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joel Carlson, I represent the Creditors' Rights Association. We concur with this. We are signatory to the letter and appreciate your support for these needed updates.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions from members of the committee? Not seeing any. At this point, Senator Limmer, would you like to move the bill?
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Senator Limmer moves that Senate File 2847 as amended be recommended to pass and be sent to the Senate floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Senator Boldon. Senator Gustafson, Senate File 1055. All right, members, the anticipation here is to lay this bill over for possible inclusion. We do have an A1 amendment. This is the first stop for this bill. Senator Westlin moves adoption of the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to describe the amendment?
Yes, why don't you describe the whole bill and the amendment?
Okay, I'll do both. So the amendment, it just preserves the prosecutor's duty to disclose information to the defense. I'll just keep it short and then tell you a little bit more about the bill. Senate File 1055 aims to strengthen protections for victims of domestic abuse by amending current law regarding advocate-victim privilege. So existing law shields certain confidential communications like those between attorneys and clients, but currently a court can compel domestic violence advocates to disclose information received from a victim. This bill seeks to change that, prohibiting domestic violence advocates from disclosing such information without the victim's consent. The criminal justice system can be daunting and re-traumatizing for a lot of victims. The act of coming forward requires immense courage. This legislation recognizes that by ensuring greater confidentiality, it's a crucial step towards restoring some trust in the system, acknowledging the victim's bravery, and facilitating their access to vital support services. While not a foolproof solution, it's an important step in the right direction. Currently, Minnesota law grants sexual violence advocates a higher level of confidentiality than domestic violence advocates. Sexual violence advocates cannot be compelled to disclose information without the victim's consent. However, domestic violence advocates can be compelled by a court to disclose such information in certain circumstances, and this distinction in the law is what the bill seeks to eliminate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. We also have Raina Alexander is signed up to testify. Ms. Alexander, come on forward and identify yourself for the record, please.
Good morning. Chair Latz and esteemed members of the committee, my name is Raina Alexander, and I'm here to speak in support of Senate File 1055. Domestic violence is an underreported crime, and among the many reasons that victims give for not reporting or seeking help is the loss of anonymity and privacy that comes with engaging with the criminal justice system. Access to confidential advocacy services, crisis support, and ongoing counseling is critical to the health, recovery, and safety of domestic violence victims. Working with a community-based domestic violence advocate can provide safe, confidential, and non-judgmental opportunity for a victim of domestic violence to consider all available options while addressing any pressing needs, including crisis support and access to services and responding to the trauma they have experienced. In 2008, the Minnesota legislature, without a single no vote or any objection, recognized the public interest in a domestic violence victim's health and safety rises to the level to justify the creation of a specific privilege protecting confidential information. We are now asking that the legislature update this statute to bring it in line with the sexual assault counselor privilege. In 2022, the Minnesota Supreme Court issued a decision finding that the sexual assault counselor privilege was an absolute privilege. However, the court also specifically found that the domestic abuse advocate privilege was to have broad exceptions, including that the court could order disclosure from the advocate's records or conversations. This means that if a domestic violence victim seeks support from a domestic abuse advocate, in their conversation is not strictly privileged. Considering between 40 to 45% of domestic violence victims will experience sexual assault during the course of their abusive relationship, if the same domestic violence victim speaks to a sexual assault counselor, that conversation will be strictly privileged. However, many programs serve both domestic and sexual violence victims, which means victims could tell their story to an advocate, and part of their story about sexual violence will be strictly privileged, and part of their story about domestic violence would not be. This leaves victims and domestic violence advocates unclear about whether their conversations are absolutely privileged. Domestic violence victims deserve to have the same protected conversations with a domestic abuse advocate that they can have with a sexual assault counselor. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Any questions for Ms. Alexander? Senator Limmer.
Thank you. Ms. Alexander, does this proposal in any way conflict with mandated reporting?
No, it does not.
Ms. Alexander.
Sorry. No, it does not. Specifically in the bill, it allows for on line 4.16 and 4.17 that it exempts domestic abuse advocates. This doesn't exempt them from compliance with mandatory reporting for child abuse or elder abuse.
Thank you.
Senator Gustafson, I understand that with the amendment that we've adopted, there appears to be stakeholder agreement in how to proceed with this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 4, line 12 and 13, it's talking about the domestic abuse advocate the information they acquired in attending the victim in a professional capacity. I'm just, and maybe this is a question for counsel, I'm not sure, and I tried to do a little research here before, but since we're talking about an individual acting within their professional capacity, is there a statutory definition for domestic abuse advocate somewhere?
Line 4.18, Senator Kroon.
Oh, so it's in this bill?
It's existing statute with one modification on line 4.19.
Oh, I see. And then, okay, so Mr. Chair,
Senator Kroon.
and so because this is in the same section, we wouldn't need a statutory cross-reference because it's going to be right in the same section, is that correct? Got it.
Yes, Senator Kroon. Any other questions or discussion?
One more, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the A1, I'm just trying to imagine I understand what it says, but a scenario for the prosecutors here, their obligations, and how would this play out? Because if this is confidential and there's a privilege, but this is relating to the prosecutor who's not the domestic abuse advocate, what were the prosecutors worried about here, and what really was the purpose for including this A1?
Senator Gustafson.
To the testifier, thank you.
Ms. Alexander.
Thank you. We wanted to make sure that it was clear that if a domestic abuse advocate receives, they get a release of information to share information with the prosecutor, that then the prosecutor can fulfill their Rule 9 responsibility of then providing that information to the defense.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Kroon.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But if that information is shared, wouldn't that break the privilege?
Ms. Alexander.
The conversations would still be privileged. Privilege doesn't go away. What would happen is that piece of information that was shared, that piece of information is no longer privileged, but all other pieces of information continue to be privileged.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from members of the committee? Members, there are letters in your packet in connection with this proposal as well, just for your reference. Seeing no further discussion, Senate File 1055 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you. Members will now go to Senate File 2574, Senator Gustafson. And if Ms. Barrow come forward from the Department of Administration, you anticipated my invitation. Senator Gustafson, why don't you go ahead and tell us about this bill? I think this whole bill is within this committee's jurisdiction, and the intention is to move it on to state and local government.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senate File 2574 is an effort to prevent fraud in state programs. Specifically, the bill empowers state agencies to narrowly share information to facilitate investigations of fraud. And I have a testifier here who's ready to say more.
Ms. Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. For the record, my name is Julie Byrell, and I'm the Legislative Director at the Department of Administration. The data sharing in Senate File 2574 is part of the Governor's Anti-Fraud Package and provides an additional tool in the state's toolbox to prevent fraud in state government programs. In a nutshell, the bill strengthens the authority for state agencies to share data with one another related to suspected or confirmed fraud in public programs. It is specifically allowed if the access promotes the protection of public resources or promotes the integrity of public programs, or aids in the law enforcement process. The importance for this data sharing provision hinges on the need for state agencies to effectively communicate and collaborate with one another and to streamline reporting processes, specifically related to preventing fraud in public programs. The language is narrowly drafted for the specific purpose and does not allow for the sharing of data when specifically prohibited by law. While a variety of authorities currently exist in law to legally share data between certain agencies for specified purposes, threats are evolving every day, and government also needs new tools to help combat fraud in public programs. This new provision within the Data Practices Act, applying to all government entities, is necessary to provide a streamlined approach to meet this common goal. Thank you for your time. I am pinch hitting for our Deputy Commissioner today, so I'm not an expert on data practices, but I will do my best to answer any questions that you have.
Ms. Byrell, I apologize. You'd think by now I would have gotten your name right, but
No problem, Mr. Chair.
all right. Any questions from members of the committee at this time? Or conversation, discussion? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question would be on subdivision 2. Despite the fact that any statute that's made reference to is a criminal law statute, 609 chapter, there's no reference in the data sharing of the potentiality of making reference to chapter 13 on data. And perhaps this question is for council. Is there a need to recognize any of the data sharing elements and make cross-reference with chapter 13?
Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, this new section of law is being added to Chapter 13 as a section, so I believe the definitions in 13.02 would apply to this new statute if it was enacted.
Mr. Chair, I know
Senator Limmer.
I know that we often make references like this. In the last few years, we've been trying to cross-reference Chapter 13 whenever we can. Otherwise, we have a spider web of references in statute that doesn't always have a reference. I'm just wondering if we need belt and suspenders on this one, or if it's self-explanatory. Maybe council could give me more advice.
Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm just pulling up 13.02, and I believe, the applicability section in 13.02 says, as used in this chapter, the terms defined in this section have the meanings given. So I think those definitions would apply to this new Chapter 13 section.
Mr. Chair, I see the
Senator
reference
Limmer.
to Chapter 13 now. The other question I did have is on lines 1.19 and to the end of the page, it says any government entity may disclose, that's fine, suspected or confirmed fraud to any other government entity. And then it makes reference to even federal or law enforcement agencies, and I suppose that would be either state or federal law enforcement agencies in order to protect protection of public resources, et cetera. It just seems to me a little broad whenever I see the word any, but it looks like it does the words federal agency, law enforcement agency, I see that's a qualifier, but other government entity is my concern. Could someone pass a suspected information to a government agency that has no reference to law enforcement? It looks like it could in this language. Do we need the words other government entity on lines 1.21? Perhaps council might be able to answer that.
Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, that is a policy choice for the committee, but that the data sharing, as I read it, does permit sharing of data of any classification to any other government entity as long as it's for the purpose of promoting the protection of public resources or the promotion of the integrity of public programs or to aid law enforcement. So each of those purposes is its own separate reason or justification for sharing the data with any government entity or any federal agency or law enforcement entity.
One other
Senator Limmer.
One other item, Mr. Chair. Sorry to belabor this, but as I read federal agency, I've always had discussions on data privacy that in the event that data is shared outside of the state of Minnesota, we kind of lose our enforcement parameters. And so once data that's suspecting fraud, if it goes to a federal agency, right now, the way it's written is under Chapter 13, which would cause the enforcement. If it went somewhere else, I think we would be losing our enforcement mechanism if, let's say, the federal agency was in Chicago. That information could be passed to just about anyone, and then we would lose that protective status. Is that a concern for anyone?
Senator Limmer, is that a question, and to whom are you directing it?
Yeah, so I was
Or are you
going
just
to
throwing it out there
pass that
into
to
the ether
Senator
and see what
Kroon.
happens?
All I'm pointing out is I think we have a reference here that we may not be able to enforce some of the parameters.
Ms. Barlow, would you like to respond to that point?
You know, I hesitate to reference Feeding Our Future, but that was a federal program. And so we want to make sure that agencies are not, that there's no barriers from them discussing concerns that they have. We are open to narrowing the language if the legislature would prefer to see discussions or sharing of information between state agencies only so that we maintain that control. I will also highlight that occasionally, DHS deals a lot with counties, and so we may want to maybe limit it to the state of Minnesota.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Limmer.
does council have any suggestions on language to constrain information? I don't necessarily mean to constrain federal investigation, but at the same time, if Chapter 13 puts parameters of who can share and who cannot, we're making an exception to this case, but once it gets outside of the jurisdiction of Minnesota, that information could be leaked anywhere.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Senator Limmer. I also want to point out, too, federal agencies are key in things like Medicare fraud. We have to be able to communicate with them on the federal level, too. I understand your concerns about losing a jurisdiction if we have a case of local provider recipient fraud or something of that nature here in Minnesota, but I think we have to keep federal agencies for some of the things that we need and other programs that we have that are connected to the federal government.
Mr. Chair, I understand that
Senator Limmer.
that criminal investigation, if it goes to a formal criminal investigation, that information would be kept confidential, both by state and federal. But as long as it is not up to a full investigation that's qualified as a criminal investigation, I don't know what the exposure is.
Ms. Primo
at the
has,
federal level.
Ms. Primo has some thoughts on the matter for us. Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, I could certainly craft language, but I think it would be a policy choice about where the line should be drawn. Some things for the committee to consider. This allows the sharing of data of any classification, private, confidential, non-public, protected, non-public, and that means it's also data on individuals and also data on entities. So that's one potential area for the committee to consider. It allows sharing of data with any government entity and any federal agency without consideration of whether that entity or agency has any sort of investigative authority. That could be another area to limit it to sharing with entities that actually have jurisdiction to investigate the specific allegations that underlie that complaint. Another area for the committee to think about is looking at lines 2.1 to 2.2, thinking through how you may want to narrow or more define the specific purposes for which the data is shared. Right now in the bill, there are those 3 buckets I mentioned earlier, and each of those are their own reasons to share the data, and perhaps some of those are broad, perhaps some of those are overly inclusive, and that could be another place for the committee to consider other options.
Senator Limmer, did you want to follow up, or should I invite Senator Kroon into the conversation, who also wanted to speak?
Mr. Chair, before you do that,
Senator
is
Lund.
this intended to lay over, or are we moving the bill?
The original intent was to send it to state and local, but if there are things that we still need to do to work on the bill, we can certainly continue that work by laying it over.
I'll
for that
yield to
purpose or having it
Senator
back.
Kroon at this time.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Limmer, of course, beat me to the punch on some of these questions, but one other thing I just wanted to clarify on the record. First of all, I think it's a good idea. It's an important idea. It seems like it's kind of a catch-all, an umbrella, to make sure that there isn't anything that falls through the cracks in terms of sharing information on fraud investigations between governmental agencies, that you can't, put up, that there aren't silos that maybe we don't know about, or, so I like the idea of this catch-all, of this umbrella. But I did have the same concern Senator Limmer had once I saw federal agency. I do think it's important to share the information with federal agencies, but I don't know if a state law would even, whether that would even apply to the federal government. I suspect it wouldn't. But backing up a little bit, just broadly speaking, I'm assuming the intent of this data sharing is whatever the classification of the data when it's transferred, that classification stays upon the transfer. And my question is whether or not we need to say that in this bill, or whether or not, because of where it's located in Chapter 13, whether that is implied and we don't need to specifically say it.
Response? Not necessary. Maybe it's just a comment. It's up to you. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I don't disagree with those concerns. I'll maybe lean on the testifier to why that language was specifically chosen for this bill. They might be able to provide more insight.
Ms. Byron.
I believe because it's under Chapter 13 that those classifications would stand or would follow those, but I would defer to council if they have other opinions.
Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm sorry, was the question about what would happen to the data when it's sent to the federal agency? I missed that.
Classification of the data, does it transfer regardless of where it goes?
When it's within a government entity, like a Minnesota state government entity, but not if it's sent to a federal agency, that would be subject to however it would be treated under federal law. And generally, the protections are not the same as our Government Data Practices Act.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Kroon.
Real quick for council, because I know you were doing something else when I was at, but the question specifically was between Minnesota government agencies. I know that the classification travels with the transfer of the data, but does this bill need to specifically say that, or because of where it's placed in Chapter 13, is it implied?
Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, sorry, thank you for that clarification. No, the traveling data classification would automatically apply when the data is shared with a government entity. The only way that data classification changes is that if under the statute that governs that specific data, once it is with that other entity, there's a specific classification. So first, for example, if it's sent to a law enforcement agency in Minnesota, 13.82 would apply, and then there it would be subject to the confidential and protected non-public status of an active criminal investigation.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. I'm pretty comfortable with the state to state. I'm struggling a little bit with the state to federal because I like the policy, but I don't know how common it is in our Data Practices Act to, are there other instances where a state agency is transferring data to a federal agency, and we kind of do lose control of that. So I guess maybe that's just a policy decision, and maybe we can, if we tighten up 2.1 to 2.2, maybe that alleviates some of our concerns. I like the suggestion that the transferee agency has to have authority to investigate that, whatever the fraud that's being investigated. I think that's a good addition. So it's not just anything. I remember there was a controversy a few years back about the driver's license and sending private information to, about people's driver's license for no specific, law enforcement reason. And so maybe tightening up that would be a good idea. But I like the overall concept of the bill. I'm just struggling with that federal part. I don't want to put up a silo, but I'm concerned about the data practices, losing control of that and how that's normally done. Thanks.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Latz. I think we were talking here too, some of this, on line 120, it says may disclose. So they aren't required to. I think it's when it feels like it is appropriate in that investigation for them to share with the federal agency and other government entity, law enforcement. It is just providing that freedom for agencies to be able to do that. But I don't know if that alleviates any of the concern around language, but I just thought it was an important point that this isn't mandating that they have to, it's just giving them the freedom and option to do so.
So Ms. Primo has identified 3 different categories that we might consider tightening up if we want to. Because all data is included, all other government entities are included, and the range of purposes described on page 2 are included. The main concern seems to be that we lose control over the data if it goes to a federal agency. And I'm not sure if there's anything that we could do in state law that would protect the data once it leaves the state and goes to a federal agency. We could say all that we want, and the feds will do whatever they want. And so probably Senator Gustafson's point, which is that it's at the discretion of the state agency whether to disclose it, understanding that the data, when it's gone, is gone. Now, if the idea is to prevent fraud, basically, I would assume a federal agency is going to treat it carefully also as part of their follow-up on it. But that's a big assumption, I guess. What kind of control we have is another question. It looks like council's awfully busy over here. I don't know if you are drafting some thoughts on this or if it's something else that you're working on. Let me get a sense. Should we pause? If you want to do some work behind the scenes on this, we could lay the bill over for a little bit to allow some conversations to happen, or we can continue talking about it right now if you've got something to share. Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm not sure I have clear direction from the committee about the specific changes. I think I heard Senator Kroon mention that maybe he would like it to go to an agency that essentially has the authority to investigate the suspected or confirmed fraud, or with like some sort of oversight function over those potential allegations. So I can work on that piece, but if there's something else that the committee would also like me to work on, I can do that too if I know what it is.
So in other words, the question would be whether we add some language to put guardrails around the exercise of the discretion as to whom to disclose the data. Is that sort of the question that's before us? Ms. Primo?
Mr. Chair and members, yes, I think where are the specific guardrails you'd like? Is it who the agency is that it's sent to, or is it maybe the purposes for which it's sent? I think those are probably the two buckets I'm kind of hearing some conversation about.
Senator Limmer.
I apologize for bringing this up, but nevertheless,
You're forgiven.
I'm thinking, Mr. Chair, that as I'm looking at this subdivision 2, we're allowing any government entity in the event that they suspect fraud to share information. Perhaps we could create a stepped form of doing it. This is just a thought. If the government entity suspects fraud, first they report to a state law enforcement agency, and upon finding of possible fraud, then that state law enforcement agency could share it with federal. At least there's a little bit more qualification of the data rather than just getting the suspicion from a government entity directly to a federal law enforcement agency. At least it would qualify the process a little bit more. And the federal government would recognize the confidentiality of the state investigation. Perhaps that would trigger them to handle that information in a more qualified manner themselves.
So Senator Limmer, theoretically, any government agency, any government entity on lines 19 and 20 that is considering this disclosure would maybe have to run it through the Department of Administration first, for example.
Yeah, well,
and then the Department of Administration, if they decide to greenlight the data sharing, maybe could enter into some kind of an agreement with the federal agency to guide how the data is handled theoretically here.
yeah, Mr. Chair, you're close. I'm not sure if the administration agency needs to have a stop there, because right now it's the government entity can give this information directly to a law enforcement agency. And
It sounds like what you're suggesting, Senator Limmer, is that there ought to be some other sort of review before the data is disclosed to, say, a federal agency.
correct.
So it could be done by, for example, the Department of Administration or maybe some other entity, but I'm trying to understand where you're going conceptually.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think what I'm trying to say is that the Department of Administration may not be schooled in the discipline of criminal investigation. I don't know why we would want them in the middle to determine whether or not there's fraud or not. Law enforcement is really the one that we would want, I suspect. And it wouldn't cause an administrative delay either.
Ms. Byrell, any suggestions if we were to interject an agency review of some sort before the data makes its way to the federal government as to who ought to conduct that review?
Mr. Chair, I do worry that that would invoke perhaps a cost. I would agree that I don't think it should be the Department of Administration, because while we handle grants and we have the Data Practices Office, we aren't able to always spot where there might be fraud. So I'm hesitant to suggest any other agency as well, just because I don't want to throw anyone else under the bus or invoke any other cost.
I'm not even on it.
Any provision of law to the contrary. I mean, I would even point that one too. I don't know.
So Ms. Primo has a suggestion that might narrow this a bit and maybe get at what Senator Kroon and Senator Limmer have raised have identified as concerns. Ms. Primo?
Mr. Chair and members, the amendment would be page 1, line 21, after agency, insert with oversight or investigative authority over the suspected or confirmed fraud.
So Ms. Primo then, so that would apply to any other government entity, federal agency, or law enforcement agency. All three of those would be circumscribed, at least to the extent they have oversight or investigative authority or over suspected or confirmed fraud. Is that correct, Ms. Primo?
Mr. Chair and members, yes.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we add prosecutorial to that as well? Not just oversight or investigative authority, but also prosecutorial authority?
I see Ms. Primo is adding that. Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, yes. So then page 1, line 21, after agency, insert with oversight, investigative, or prosecutorial authority over the suspected or confirmed fraud.
Senator Kroon, what do you think about that? Senator Limmer, what do you think about that?
It's better, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we've really got it, but I don't know if we have the time to do it right now, but we're getting close.
Senator Gustafson, Ms. Byral, what do you think?
With this change?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, yes, we agree with that language.
Senator Limmer, I know you're still hesitating a bit, and I want to make sure we get this right in terms of the committee's approach to this, because it's not anticipated this bill would come back to us.
Right.
So this would be the place to complete the work. Do you have any, you had suggested a filter agency, if you will, or entity. Do you have any suggestions, or would you like, are you comfortable with this limitation, taking care of it? Or would you prefer to figure out an agency that might review?
Why don't we?
I mean, it might get to a fiscal impact too, if the data being shared, if it happens often enough or it's enough data, it might involve a pretty robust review of it before letting it go through the process, and delay may or may not be the best interests of the public on that.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Limmer.
For now, I think the narrowing language is certainly in agreement with me. I'll continue to study it on the side as it progresses, make sure the committee is aware if I come up with anything new. Certainly, Senator Gustafson, I'll make sure she knows as well. But I would suggest that we move forward on the suggested language.
Is there any question about the language that's being suggested? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chair, would council reiterate that last amendment?
Ms. Primo, please restate what will be Senator Kroon's amendment.
Mr. Chair and members, page 1, line 21, after agency, insert with oversight, investigative, or prosecutorial authority over the suspected or confirmed fraud.
Senator Kroon, would you like to offer that amendment?
So moved.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Is there any further discussion on Senate File 2574? Not seeing any. Senator Kroon, would you like to make the motion here?
Moved to the Senate floor? Or with
State and local government.
Yeah, I'll move to recommend pass and re-refer to state and local.
Senator Cruen moves that Senate File 2574 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Committee on State and Local Government. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you, members, for your work on that bill. Senator Gustafson, don't go too far. Senate File 856. There is an amendment being distributed, but this is, or it's with your packets, but this is not the first stop. It's coming back to us, so it won't be an author's amendment. So why don't we listen to our testifiers here, Senator Gustafson and Senator Cruen. I know you both have been working very hard on this package. Thank you for doing all of that. Why don't you tell us what the status is and what you'd like us to know about the amendment, whichever one wants to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep, we are back in Judiciary today to revisit the data practices section of the bill to establish an Office of Inspector General. I'll let Senator Cruen go through the technical changes, but this version significantly sharpens the bill's data transparency and privacy provisions to ensure strong legislative oversight while protecting due process and legal privilege.
Senator Cruen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll do a walk through the A46. And just to preface my comments, this is a continuation of the discussion on data practices that we had the last time the bill was in this committee, along with several other discussions with other agencies and Mr. Neumeister, Mr. Ealing, along with other members, bipartisan and bicameral. And I guess not surprising after some of the discussions we've had on data practices, there's a lot of members that have a lot of different opinions on data practices. So we're trying to kind of get everybody together to coalesce around a good, strong data practices provision in the Office of Inspector General bill. So getting to the A46, line 1.2, this was a technical recommendation from the Data Practices Office. Line 1.4, this is in the dissemination subdivision, which allows the OIG to disseminate data to a government entity if the data aids a pending investigation. We added or administrative action. This, I believe, was at the request of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. If we go to line 1.6, it deletes some of the authority to send information to MDH, DCYF, and DHS. The reason for that is the substantive language which prompted this to be added to the data practices was removed at the last at the previous committee stop, but the data practices language wasn't removed with it, so we're cleaning that up in this amendment. Lines 1.7 to line 1.8 inserts a clarifying recommendation from Matt Ealing. I believe this would be the case anyway, but there's no harm in including it. Line 1.9 to 1.10 relates to data upon completion of an investigation. The default is that the data becomes public, but this adds to the exception if the IG reasonably believes the data will be used in litigation relating to any civil, criminal, or administrative actions, including reconsideration or appeal. This added language was at the suggestions of DCYF. I think these concepts would have been included in the blanket term litigation, but I think it makes sense to include it and doesn't do any harm. Line 1.11, this goes back to the lengthy discussion we had in this committee the last time the bill was here, and adding the term general description. I believe that was at Mr. Ealing's suggestion on that, just to provide a little bit more information on investigations that were not opened or not pursued. We had a long discussion about these two words in a lot of these meetings, and the consensus is that we're comfortable putting that in. Line 1.12, we removed this because we determined it was redundant, or I believe DPO helped us to flag that it might be redundant, and we agreed. Line 1.13, this is clarifying language recommended by DPO. And so line 1.14 to 1.17 removes data classification language relating to, and this is the same thing. It's a cleanup effort. The substantive reasons why that was included are no longer in the bill. And then line 1.15, this is a new provision. This was suggested by Representative Moeller. And it clarifies that the OIG's subpoena powers and data access authorizations do not supersede legal privileges. I think that was the case anyway, so I would categorize this as comfort language, but it was very important to her, and I don't think it does any harm to include it. And then when we get into line 1.19 and down, this is kind of the real substantive change of the amendment that I look forward to committee discussion about. The discussion, as I recall it from the last committee hearing, we're two competing policy provisions and, kind of a balancing act. Senator Limmer had some concerns about making, of course, Mr. Ealing and Mr. Neumeister wanted all the data public after, if an investigation wasn't open or wasn't pursued. Senator Limmer brought up a good point about how that could be used as kind of, political warfare, so to speak, if you make an allegation against somebody and then even if it has absolutely no merit and an investigation isn't even opened, it's still public then and people can then cite the fact that it's there and use that. There's a lot of concern about abuse of that, so thinking of ways to maximize transparency while taking in that consideration into account. We came up with a compromise which we added the general description language from Mr. Ealing, but we did not make it all public. Instead, we put in this report, and we actually borrowed this provision from the House version that had it, but it's, despite where it came from, I still think it's good language. Sorry. And really, this will not, and if you recall, Mr. Ealing wanted the individuals to be named publicly. This will not do that, but it will get at all the rest of the information that he wanted. So this would be an annual report to this committee and state and local that talks about all of the tips and where an investigation was not started or not pursued, and it requires some information on that so that the public knows what kind of tips and complaints that the OIG is getting, but it doesn't reveal those names. So I think it's compromise language between those competing policy considerations. So that was where the most of the discussion was, and I think generally speaking, people are happy with it. I've had several consultations with many people, including Mr. Ealing and Mr. Neumeister. I know that they couldn't make it today, and I don't want to say that they love this compromise, but they don't hate it, and they understand what we're doing here, and they really like the report aspect of this. And so I don't know what their official position is, and I don't want to speak for them, but I know we had very good conversations, and they're not adamantly opposed. I think I can safely say that.
Thank you, Senator Kroon. We'll open this up for discussion, but I guess I have a technical question for council on the amendment, line 14. It says to delete page 9, lines 6 and 7. Seems to leave line 8 as a hangover line there. Does it need to say line 8 as well?
Mr. Chair and members, yes, that is a technical error in my drafting process, so I apologize. So maybe there could be an oral amendment on line 1.14 of the A46 amendment, delete and 7, insert 2-8. So it would read delete lines 6 to 8.
All right. When Senator Kroon moves the amendment, you can incorporate that into that Let's proceed to discussion from members of the committee on the proposed A46 amendment. Is anyone here in the audience connected to this proposal wish to speak on it? Not seeing anyone come forward. Not seeing any committee discussion. Senator Kroon moves the adoption of the A46 amendment as amended on line 14 described by Ms. Primo. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Senator Westrom has joined us. With that amendment, is there anything else relating to this bill, Senator Gustafson or Senator Kroon, that needs to be considered by this committee? No? No. See both senators shaking their heads no. With that, then, members, the next step for this is to go to the Rules Committee. Senator Kroon?
So move to
Senator
recommend
Kroon
to
moves
pass.
that Senate File 856 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Senate Committee on Rules. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you. That, I believe, concludes the Senator Gustafson portion of our agenda today. Senator Kroon, thank you, both of you, for all of your work on that. I know there's a lot of outside of this committee work.
So we're going to jump to 1907 to accommodate a testifier quickly. Because it was
Does Westlin?
everyone knows.
Okay. 1907, where are we down here? We're going to bring Senate File 1907 before the committee, out of order, but we're accommodating the schedule of a testifier. Senator Oumou Verbeten. And members, this is the first stop for this bill. There is no amendment proposed at this time. Senator Oumou Verbeten, if you go ahead and we do have this amendment in the packets. I don't see it. Let's have the, can we have that distributed, or do you just want to do it orally? All right, Senator Oumou Verbeten, you aware of council's proposed amendment to delete section 1?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do. I don't see it in the packets, but that is the amendment I wanted to bring forward.
Okay, that's a simple one to do orally. Senator Oumou Verbeten moves as an author's amendment to delete section 1 of Senate File 1907. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment's adopted. Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 1907 ensures that victims will receive offender apology letters only if they desire to receive them. DOC currently has a process for offenders to submit apology letters, but often victims are unaware that an offender has submitted a letter of apology. This bill amends 611A.06, which instructs DOC to make their best faith effort to notify victims that a letter of apology has been submitted, again, only if they have requested to be notified. This change that's in that statute 611A.06 will then be referenced in 611A.039, which outlines victims' post-conviction rights. And so this will prompt OJP to include this right in their model notice to victims. So in other words, victims will know that they can request to be notified if an offender submits a letter of apology. And then victims can submit a written request to the head of the county correctional facility or to the Department of Corrections. The department also has an electronic victim notification system. And again, this is only if they've opted into being notified to receive this letter. Apology letters are an important part of restorative justice and should be allowed with victims' consent. This bill, again, as amended at the request of the Office of Justice Programs, just make sure that it is part of post-conviction rights for victims. I think DOC has also submitted a letter just saying they don't have concerns and are able to meet that request. And then lastly, this bill is supported by the Justice for All Coalition, which includes Violence Free Minnesota. They've been, appreciate being consulted throughout the process and also don't have concerns.
Thank you, Senator Oumou Verbeten. We do have a testifier here today, Blair Kirby, University of St. Thomas law student. Welcome to the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. Go ahead and just identify yourself. We'd like to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Chair Lutz. Good morning, Senators. My name is Blair Kirby, and I'm a second-year law student at the University of St. Thomas School of Law. On behalf of the Federal Commutations Clinic, I'm here to testify about the victim's right to be notified of offender letters of apology. I would like to start by emphasizing the importance of clemency. Clemency is about mercy and forgiveness for those who show true remorse and transformation. Recognizing individuals for who they are now, rather than when they committed the crime, dignifies them. A second chance fosters rehabilitation and breaks the cycle of abuse and violence caused by systemic discrimination. The work of the Pardon Board and Clemency Review Commission highlights how offenders can take ownership of their crimes and successfully reform. Also, restorative justice is central to clemency, with apology letters offering victims a chance to heal and forgive. If victims need to know an offender's remorse to move forward, not receiving these letters makes that difficult. In one case, an inmate wrote 4 apology letters, but they were lost, leading to a devastating outcome at a Pardon Board hearing. The false narrative of no apology, despite decades of remarkable transformation, harmed the petitioner and re-traumatized victims. We request that apology letters be treated equally to other victim notifications. Additionally, we ask that the triers of fact, such as the Pardon Board, Clemency Review Commission, and the courts, have notice of and access to these letters. Relying only on police reports and court dockets is insufficient, as clemency should assess who the person is now, and the apology letter reflects this transformation. Those who stand before the Pardon Board have been verified by the Clemency Review Commission. However, there has been a clear gap in understanding of the level of ownership that the candidate displayed due to the lack of evidence that speaks for transformation. 15 minutes of testifying isn't enough, and it is an uphill battle for those candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kirby. Senator Oumou Verbeten, did you have any other testifiers today? Any discussion from members of the committee? The intent is to lay this over for possible inclusion. Ms. Kirby, what year are you at the law school?
I'm a second year. I have 1 more year left.
Terrific. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any further discussion or testimony. Senate File 1907 is laid over for possible inclusion. Now get back to class. Okay, now we're going to start in on the Senator Westlin portion of our judiciary hearing today, and we're going to start with Senate File 2384 on election administration. Senator Westlin, get settled in. We've got staff ready to bring you nutrients if you need them. Actually, they'll probably be your nutrients that you supply. And I see a testifier has joined you as well. So why don't you, let's see here. This is not your first stop, but there is an amendment. So why don't you give us some context on the bill and tell us specifically what brings it to the Judiciary Committee, and then we'll consider your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you,
Senator
members. Yes, settle in. We've got a few bills. This first bill is Senate File 2384. Each year, the Secretary of State's office sends their administrative bill to the Elections Committee, and that is what this bill represents, is the Office of the Secretary of State's provisions that seek to improve the way that our elections function for voters across the state. These are brought forward by voters and also by local election administrators. We do have the A5 amendment, and this amendment specifically clarifies that private data in two sections has the meaning as defined in 13.02 subdivision 12. The changes to section 24 add clarification of what an agreement to correct an error must include to ensure the agreement is comprehensive. And then the final change makes crystal clear that using this out-of-court remedy is not exclusive and any person can still file a 204B.44 errors and omissions petition in court. My understanding of the portions of the bill that fall within this committee's jurisdictions would include lines 15.24 to 15.25, lines 16.3 to 16.4, and then section 24. But I do have with me today Nicole Freeman from the Secretary of State's office who will walk us through the bill as well as any questions about the amendment. But maybe we should take care of the amendment first, Mr. Chair.
We can do that. Did you want to have Ms. Freeman describe anything relating to the amendment, or do you feel you've already covered it, Senator Westlin?
I think I've mostly covered it, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Freeman, do you have anything to add regarding the A5 amendment at this time? Welcome to the committee, by the way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Nicole Freeman, Office of the Secretary of State. I don't have anything to add to the amendment. I think talking about the bill as a whole, the portions in this committee's jurisdiction as a whole might be more advantageous.
Why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll consider the amendment in context.
That sounds great. All right. Thank you, Senator. So thank you for having us here today. As Senator Westlin mentioned, this bill does include various technical and administrative elections-related provisions. We do one of these bills most years. And as the Senator mentioned, there's just a few portions in this committee's jurisdiction. Sections 15 and 16, they clarify that a proof of residence and documents that someone might show to prove their residence as a candidate is submitting their affidavit of candidacy. Maybe I should back up. In 2024, there was an addition to when an affidavit of candidacy is submitted by a candidate for state, federal, and county office, that they need to show proof of residency to the filing clerk at the time of filing. And so with that, as we were digging in, we found these two sections where candidates can submit their their affidavits of filing separately, not necessarily in person. So they could submit them electronically or potentially by mail as well. And so when they do that, they're going to need to still submit these proof of residency documents or a copy of an ID, a copy of a bill, things that are documents that can be used to register to vote. And so we're clarifying here that data, so if someone sends a copy of their whole driver's license or a copy of their passport or a copy of a bill, those pieces of information would remain private since it likely has sensitive information on it. And then in section 24, this is a section that amends the 204B.44 petition process. It's one way that individuals can, right now there's just one way that any individual impacted by an error or omission related to an official ballot or other election conduct, right now their only remedy is to go in over the last several years is that these cases and the need to go to court to fix often small issues, such as ballot errors, it takes time. And so what this section does in 24 is prescribes an out-of-court remedy for election-related errors to be corrected. This remedy requires the local official as well as candidates involved to agree on that remedy, and then they can move forward. The remedy will be, I think, really helpful, as I mentioned, for resolving these minor ballot errors. Some people might remember there was a candidate whose middle initial was incorrect. Also, there was an inadvertent switching of candidate political party designation, And so this process really aims to save local jurisdictions on court costs, as well as ensure the errors can be corrected quickly and ballots can get reprinted and back out to voters. And the one thing I would mention about the amendment is that it makes it clear that this new remedy isn't exclusive, and that candidates or jurisdictions can always go to court if they wish or if the situation requires. So I think that's all I'll say, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Freeman, can you, I notice on section 24, page 22, paragraph E, there's a prevailing party attorney's fee, I'm sorry, costs and disbursements. It's only costs and disbursements, right? Not
Yes.
attorney's fees?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And what is the reason for that provision?
Yeah, so the reason there was to provide a little bit of incentive for candidates to resolve these disputes outside of court and not play, games with the process. So like I mentioned, there's oftentimes, there may be an error on the ballot. For example, there was one in 2024 where 2 candidates' political parties got switched. That's a really simple fix, right? Their affidavit of candidates. Really clear what parties they belong to from just other, public knowledge, but also their affidavits of candidacy are clear. The fix is really simple, but you could see a situation where one candidate might try to play games and say, no, I don't want to agree for them to be switched. I don't want to sign this agreement. And so we're trying to put a little bit of incentive without fully penalizing, because I think the important part there too is that the only time they would be required to pay the costs is if the court determines that the candidate's position wasn't substantively justified. And so the only time they would be doing that is if the candidate's position wasn't substantially justified. And so if someone had a legitimate objection to the agreement, I think the court would find that, no, you're not going to be paying these court fees. But for these simple situations where it's really clear, we wanted some incentive for people to not play games so that we can correct the error and get the proper ballots out to voters and move on with the election.
And Mr. Chair, I would add too that
Senator
the other provision is that if imposing those costs would impose an undue hardship or be inequitable, the court can also waive those. The court would also, under those circumstances, not impose the costs. And I think, as we know, our court systems are struggling to keep up with the cases that they have. This is encouraging people to reach agreements outside of court that are reasonable and will provide a more timely way to address errors and omissions that may be very simple to correct.
Any, let's see, I will just note that we do have available to answer questions the General Counsel from the Secretary of State's office. Any discussion from members of the committee or questions before we take action on the proposed amendment? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Freeman, could you explain the A5 amendment? I didn't hear much of an explanation for the A5.
Mr. Chair, Senator Limmer,
Senator
I can give it a
Westlin.
shot, and Ms. Freeman can supplement. So when people submit their affidavit of candidacy, normally it's done in person, and at that point, documents can be viewed and verified in person. People also have the option of submitting documents electronically or by mail, so they may include a full photocopy of their passport or their driver's license. So the first provisions, 1.2 through 1.5, just says that information would be private. And then the other provision is that it just provides some clarification around the agreement, and that it also specifically does not prevent someone from filing something in court if they so choose. And if I got that right, then that's good. But if you need some more detail, I think Ms. Freeman can help.
Ms. Freeman, anything to add to that, or you're good?
No.
Okay. Senator Limmer.
No, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion relating to the A5 amendment? Senator Westlin moves adoption of the A5 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Any further discussion on Senate File 2384 as amended? Seeing no further discussion, Senator Westlin moves that Senate File 2384 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Committee on Elections. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Senator Westlin, what order would you like to take your remaining bills in? Or
I
that's
think
next?
we will probably go in the order on the list. I just wanted to make sure that Ms. Freeman could get back to work. So Senate File 1812 would be up next. Mr.
Senate
Chair.
File 1812 is before the committee. It will be distributed to the committee members. Senator Westlin, go ahead and describe your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This is the second stop for this bill. We heard this earlier this week in the Elections Committee. Senate File 1812 is what I would describe as an anti-bribery bill. Over the past week, news stories have reported on the big money pouring into the race for the Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. That race is now the most expensive judicial race in American history. The two campaigns and IE groups and PACs have now spent more than $80 million, and it's estimated by Election Day the spending in this race is likely to reach $100 million. The AP reported that Elon Musk's Political Action Committee has not only spent money directly on the race, but the PAC, whose largest funder is Musk himself, is also offering $100 to Wisconsin voters to sign a petition in opposition to activist judges. And an additional $100 for each petition signer they refer. Such schemes prey upon those who may be experiencing financial difficulty, and I would note also, if you read the fine print on the petition itself, there's actually no guarantee you're going to be paid the money. Just this past Sunday, Mr. Musk announced he will give a town hall or an event in Wisconsin, but that entrance is limited to those who have voted in the Supreme Court race. At this event, he indicates he plans to hand over 2 checks for $1 million, quote, in appreciation for you taking the time to vote, unquote. It should be noted that Musk has a vested personal interest in the outcome of this race because his company, Tesla, is currently suing the state of Wisconsin. In this legislature, and certainly in the Elections Committee, we frequently talk about the role of money in our elections and the corrosive effect it has had on our elections since Citizens United. And while we may have some limits due to that Supreme Court decision in terms of what we can do about the amount of money in our elections, we do have an opportunity to draw a line in the sand in Minnesota and say no to wealthy, powerful, and influential individuals bribing citizens for their votes. This bill expands the existing prohibitions on bribery, and specifically, this bill prohibits attempting to induce a registered or eligible voter to sign a petition directly related to an election or attempting to influence an individual to register to vote. Importantly, the Attorney General and county attorneys are given new civil enforcement authority over violations. I would hope that we all would agree that billionaires and dark money continue to undermine our democracy and undermine the influence everyday people have on their own government and who represents them. Pew Research found that roughly 80% of Republicans and roughly 80% of Democrats believe that people who donate a lot of money to campaigns, including IE groups and PACs who are funded by dark money, have too much influence on decisions made by their elected officials. Around 72% of the public supports limiting the amount of money spent on campaigns, and roughly 60% believe it is possible to have laws that would effectively reduce the role of money in our politics. This is such a law, and this is a responsibility that I believe we should take on to protect the citizens in our country, the citizens in our state, in any event, from being preyed upon and enticed to vote or sign petitions, as is happening in Wisconsin. So, Mr. Chair, I don't believe I have any testifiers on this bill. I think it's me, and I am happy to answer any questions. I will note for the record, Mr. Chair, that this did pass through the Elections Committee with bipartisan support. I will also note, Mr. Chair, that there is room on this bill for any bipartisan authors who want to join.
Thank you, Senator Westlin. Anyone in the room wish to testify in connection with this bill? Any discussion from members of the committee at this time? Members, the intent is for this bill to go back to elections and is likely to be dual-tracked, I think. Senator Kroon? Any other discussion? Senate File 1812. Not seeing any. Senator Westlin moves that Senate File 1812 be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Senate Committee on Elections. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. All right. Next bill, Senate File 18.
Yes,
Senator?
1851.
We'll just go in order unless you tell us otherwise.
That's correct.
Senator Westlin.
That's great.
All right, Senate File 1851. Members, the intent here is also to send this back to Elections Committee. It came from there to us. And I don't see any amendments in our packet. So, Senator Westlin, tell us about your bill and why we have it here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Senate File 1851. In 2021, the FBI stated that there had been a large uptick in scam PACs. An example of a scam PAC would be repeated instances of organizations under feel-good names asking for donations and insinuating or implying that those donations will go to a candidate or political party or other organization. In 2022, the scam PAC called Law Enforcement for a Safer America raised $14 million. However, 87% of those donations went to quote-unquote fundraising costs. In 2024, the PACs called Patriot for American Leadership and Campaign for a Conservative Majority used a clip of President Trump's voice in a robocall followed by, "President Trump needs your emergency support right now. With no time to waste and results coming in by the minute, do your part to help the campaign until the very end by pressing 3 right now to contribute to elect President Trump." This particular organization was not affiliated with the Trump campaign and donated only about 3% of their $1.4 million. The other 97% paid for vague and miscellaneous fundraising costs. While existing law prohibits groups from using campaign funds for personal use, this expands such protections to include fraudulent misrepresentation and fundraising. The benefit of a specific statute that provides a civil action is that it provides the courts with clarity that someone may actually bring an action for the specific conduct instead of placing a burden on plaintiffs to make an argument that they have standing or the statute was intended to apply to a particular set of facts. So, with this bill, Mr. Chair, Section 1, Subdivision 1 prohibits one from misrepresenting a person, campaign, or organization with the intent to defraud or knowingly participating in such a scheme. Subdivision 2, a person violating this section is guilty of a gross misdemeanor and lays out civil remedies. Those would include the Attorney General, County Attorney, or individuals being allowed to bring forth a civil action to recover damages, together with the cost of investigation and reasonable attorney fees. In addition to damages, the court may impose a civil penalty up to $1,000 per violation. Section 2 states that Section 1 is enforced as provided in that section instead of by the administrative process through the Office of Administrative Hearings. And so that is the bill.
Thank you, Senator Westlin. I don't have a note of any testifiers in connection with this bill that sought in advance to let us know about it. And anyone in the room wish to testify in connection with this bill? Not seeing anyone come forward. Any members of the committee have comments or questions? Not seeing any. Senator Westlin moves that Senate File 1851 be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Committee on Elections. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you. Members, next bill is Senate File 1854. Also Senator Westlin's. It's being handed out here. Senator Westlin, we do have an amendment on this bill, but this bill came from elections. So why don't you tell us about the bill, and then we'll consider the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And essentially, Senator Putnam and I had separate bills traveling that actually amended the same section of statute. And so the amendment really combines those two. The delete everything amendment is the A5, and it pulls his language into, and my language into the same thing. So basically, this prohibits employers, individuals, and associations from financially penalizing or firing employees or contractors for becoming a candidate for elected office unless prohibited by another law, and that was part of Senator Putnam's bill, or based on their refusal to try to influence public or local officials' decisions about a legislative or official action unless they are communicating with the public or elected officials as a requirement of their job. It does allow for a private right of action for those injured by a violation, including damages, injunctive relief, and other forms of relief that the court may deem just. It allows the Campaign Finance Board to immediately forward complaints to the relevant county attorney instead of requiring them to conduct an investigation when the board has no authority to impose a penalty. Defines employer broadly to include all types of public and private employers. And so, again, this amendment pulls in the language from Senator Putnam's bill, wherein one of his constituents was actually terminated from his employment for running, just for running for office. The choice to run for elected positions or to email one's representatives is a personal decision, and these provisions support that. As I mentioned, in February, Senator Putnam's constituent testified in the Elections Committee that he had literally been terminated from his job, and his employer told him very specifically that it was due to his long-shot candidacy for mayor. This is simply about running for office, not what happens if you're elected. The evolution of technology and the increase in our gig economy, companies have found ways to require their employees and contractors to send an email without an option to opt out as a condition to clocking in or picking up shifts. And requiring folks to choose between their First Amendment rights and their paycheck is simply inappropriate. Senate File 1854, as amended, would protect Minnesotans from being terminated for choosing to run for office or refusing to basically lobby on behalf of their employer as a condition of their employment. That is the bill, Mr. Chair. Or that's the amendment, I guess I would say.
Senator Westlin, we are verifying the council which amendment.
I'm sorry, I have what's marked as A5, but maybe it's A6.
Yeah, I think. What are we using? So, members, the A5 was distributed. There's an A6 that was posted online. There is only one minor difference, so since what you have at your desk is the A5, we're going to ask council to tell us what that minor difference is. We'll incorporate that into the A5 amendment. Ms. Primo.
Mr. Chair and members, the only difference between the two is that at line 1.24 of the A5 amendment, after the period, insert, the board may refer a violation of this section to the appropriate county attorney.
Senator Westlin, that okay with you?
Yes.
Any questions from members of the committee about that amendment to the A5 amendment? Not seeing any. Senator Westlin moves adoption of the A5 amendment as amended orally by, as just described. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Any further discussion on Senate File 1854? Members, the intent then is to move this back to the Committee on Elections. Senator Westlin moves that Senate File 1854 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Senate Committee on Elections. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Next bill up looks like Senate File 2885. Senate File 2885 is before us, Government Data Practices Act modification. The testifiers who are present can come on forward. The intent, members, is either to move it on to state and local or to lay it over at the chief author's discretion, or unless we have other input that the other committee wants to have it. So, members, this has been distributed to you. This is the first committee. There is no amendment being distributed with the packet. Senator Westlin, tell us about the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 2885 was brought to me by Hennepin County. You'll recall we had a version of this last year that ran into some disagreement among stakeholders. The bill before you today is revised and, as I understand it, has mostly received stakeholder support. This proposal would update the Data Practices and Official Records and Management Acts. The purpose of this legislation would be to modernize that to ensure that each act continues to fulfill the underlying principles of the legislation while supporting effective and efficient government functions. Section 1 adds language to 13.05 to require the responsible authority to establish procedures to monitor access to private and confidential data, but similar to other parts of this section, it does not specify how the responsible authority should monitor access. Language already exists that requires the responsible authority to establish safeguards to limit access to private or confidential data on individuals. Section 2 modifies 13.356 to classify telephone numbers and email addresses of individuals collected, maintained, or received by a government entity as private data on individuals. It does not impact name or physical address. This information may already be classified as private data on an individual elsewhere in statute, and those provisions for sharing or dissemination of the data will prevail. Additionally, there is a carve-out for this data associated with real property. Section 3 modifies 13.40 to classify names of minor children who are library patrons as private. Many areas of the law recognize that minor children are some of our most vulnerable residents, and they need greater protections than adults. Chapter 13 already classifies most data about minor children as private, but there are some gaps. Hennepin County seeks to close one of those gaps to protect the names of minor children who are library patrons. Sections 4 and 5, this change updates language in 15.17 to allow for the digital reproduction of permanent records that have not been identified as having archival value by the Minnesota Records Disposition Panel, and allows for those reproductions to have the same effect and weight as the original documents. Proposed language to 15.17 and 138.17 also removes the list of storage mediums and formats that can be used for reproduction and simply indicates the records can only be reproduced in a manner that provides a level of quality to ensure permanent records. Finally, it is proposed that a couple detailed sentences in those sections which refer back to the storage mediums and formats earlier in the section be removed to be format and storage medium neutral. So in any event, Mr. Chair, This, again, is some updates to the Data Practices Act as outlined, and for those purposes, for consideration by the committee. And I am unclear about testifiers, Mr. Chair.
Well, we'll see if there's anyone here. We do have a few that signed up, but I called the room before. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify in connection with this bill? If you are, now's your chance. No one's coming forward, Senator Westlin. So we'll proceed without that input. But essentially, as I understand it, this bill harmonizes the Official Records Act with the Data Practices Act, as well as making some other modifications to the Data Practices Act, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Senator
And I think the confusion is, I think this may have been on the schedule for this afternoon, so that could be why the testifiers aren't here. If there are questions, I certainly would be happy to lay this over until this afternoon, Mr. Chair, but I don't know.
All right, so apparently the representative from Hennepin County was notified the bill could be taken up at any time before 4 o'clock today. But let's see if there's any lack of clarity on what the bill does right now. If Senator Weston, if you prefer, we can lay it over and you can check with them, see if they have anything they want to add. You can also see if there's any questions or from the members of the committee that need to be answered by them.
Mr. Chair, I am fine proceeding with the bill. I would just simply say that if people have detailed questions that I am unable to respond to, then it would be helpful to have the Hennepin County person to testify. But if folks are okay with it, then I'm happy to move forward.
Let's see what the committee has to say. Any members of the committee have any questions or discussion about Senate File 2885? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Westlin wanted the record to show that 2 of our noted citizen lobbyists, Mr. Neumeister and Mr. Ealing from the group formerly called Menkoji, are raising serious issues about your bill. They may be in our packets, I'm not sure. I guess they are not, but nevertheless, Mr. Neumeister left me 3 pages of concern, and Senator Ealing compressed it to 1 page. But just wanted to make sure that the members knew that they had a number of specifics. I don't know if I have time to get into all the details, but if anyone wants to gain any information, I certainly would have them for people to read.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Westlin.
Were they on the list to testify this afternoon?
We don't have any testifiers that have indicated they wanted to testify on this matter. But I think what I'm going to recommend is that we momentarily lay this over, get the correspondence that was provided to Senator Limmer copied and distributed to members of the committee. Okay. So at least we can have a chance to take a look at it, and then we'll move on to one of your other bills, Senator Westlin, and then we can circle back to this one after members have a chance to digest that.
I think that's absolutely appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senate File 2885 is laid over, or is laid on the table. Next bill, Senate File 2861, Forensic Navigator Services. Members, this is being distributed. The intent is to lay it over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. This is an appropriation bill. There are no amendments being distributed at this time, and we have 1 testifier is signed up, Dr. Mary Kenning, who is appearing, and former Senator Dick Cohn has also joined the testifier at the table. Senator Westlin, how would you like to handle this? You want to make a presentation on the bill or turn it over to your testifiers? or both?
Give me 1 second, Mr. Chair. What's the problem?
Just to change it to psychologist.
Why was it dropped?
So, members, it's a blank appropriation, and we're not going to be making any financial determinations today, so we'll take testimony focused on the substance of the proposal at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am being told that we need to make some very simple oral amendments to this bill. Line 1.4, 1.6, 1.10, the word navigator needs to be changed to psychologist. 1.6, all right. Mr. Cohen, why don't you tell us what we need to amend here?
Mr. Cohen.
So, Mr. Chairman, Richard Cohen on behalf of the Forensic Psychologists Association. So, I'm not sure how this came back from the revisor's office with the word navigator, but in the title it should be Forensic Psychologist Services. 1.6 should be Forensic Psychological Services, and 1.10 should be psychologists. And I hope members might consider that change.
Mr. Cohen, there are other people known as forensic navigators in our system. I assume the point is that these are not them. These are others, and that's the purpose of the amendment. Mr. Cohen?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Any discussion about that? Senator Westlin, you agree to this change?
Yes, sir, I do.
Senator Westlin moves adoption of the amendment as described by Mr. Cohen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. We have a two-page brief, I'm not sure where it came from, that uses the title forensic examiners. So I'm just wondering what the difference is between a forensic examiner and a forensic psychologist.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, so first let's identify the source of the material that's in our packet. It's unsigned.
Mr. Chair, if I might, that was prepared by
Mr. Cohen.
Dr. Kenning, who is the witness today.
Mr. Chair, can I
Senator
present
Westlin.
the bill first, and then we can do questions, and maybe those questions can be answered,
Let's do that.
and have our
Who
testifiers
is your first
testify.
testifier, Senator Westlin?
Why don't you go ahead?
I'm Dr. Mary Kenning.
Dr. Kenning, welcome to the committee.
Thank you for the
we're
opportunity
gonna-
to be here.
Thank you. Why don't you give us a brief description of what you'd like us to know?
Sure. I'm Dr. Mary Kenning. I've been practicing as a forensic psychologist for 39 years, 28 of those as a forensic psychologist in private practice, doing work for district courts all over the state of Minnesota. I never thought I'd be able to say I've been practicing that long. Those of us doing this work are a highly specialized group of PhD-level psychologists and MD psychiatrists. For that reason, the title examiners is more correct, because we include both psychologists and psychiatrists. We work, by statute, we are required to assess the state's most vulnerable populations who are in need of civil commitment by virtue of their mental health needs and inability to care for themselves. We are also required to assess the state's most dangerous sex offenders and adults with mental health problems so severe that they are a danger to themselves and others and require indeterminate commitment. We complete Rule 20 and 611 reports to help the court make decisions regarding competency to proceed in criminal court and whether a defendant is not guilty by reason of mental illness. Our work is required by several state statutes, and the courts rely on us to help make complicated legal decisions in a variety of situations and with clients that present significant challenges to the court system. It is our responsibility to interview clients, locate and read extensive records, conduct testing, complete risk assessments, and synthesize this to write detailed, comprehensive reports that review all aspects of the person's functioning, from early development to chemical use, physical health, and mental health functioning. This requires careful analysis, leading to an appropriate diagnosis and recommendations for treatment. The graduate education required to be an MD or a PhD is not nearly enough to practice in this area. forensic psychology and psychiatry are specialties of psychology and psychiatry, and forensic practices specifically for the courts is a subspecialty of this. We have training in risk assessment, interviewing, and testing that allows us to provide expert opinions to the court. Most psychologists and psychiatrists won't touch this work, both due to the level of specialty training required and the potential for complaints to our respective licensing boards when defendants or respondents are unhappy with a court's decisions. We must have broad knowledge of our own disciplines as well as what is required by state statute and procedural rules. We must demonstrate a broad understanding of mental health issues and be able to integrate this with what is required by legal statutes. Often psychological and psychiatric information and constraints don't intersect smoothly with the legal system, and we need to be able to translate this to provide useful information to the courts and to make that information accessible to judges and attorneys. This means we have to understand legal statutes and rules as well as case law governing decisions. We must, above all, provide this information in an impartial and fair manner that does in the best interests of our clients. We must be good researchers, interviewers, and writers, and we must be able to testify to present our opinions to the court. It is difficult to maintain this type of specialty practice, given that our pay rate has been frozen since 2007, or about 18 years. We received a small increase of $11 per hour last year, but at present, our rate of pay is about half what psychologists in private practice are charging for similar work with clients with resources to seek additional evaluations. If the pay rate had kept up with inflation at a 2.4% rate, we would be now receiving $191 per hour. Thank you for your willingness to understand and respond to our request. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Kenning. Appreciate your testimony here today. Mr. Cohen, did you have anything you'd like to add in terms of testimony?
Well, Mr. Chair, just very briefly, part of my practice has been working on what's called the Ramsey County Commitment Defense Panel. That's how I know Dr. Kenning. And I can just suggest to the committee members the work done by these folks is significant and substantial. As Dr. Kenning has pointed out, there has not been an increase in almost 20 years. To be honest, Mr. Chair, this committee and predecessor committees have done a very good job of providing for court services. This is an area that has been overlooked. And clearly in greater Minnesota, there are difficulties beginning with the psychological services provided. And I'll just suggest to committee members, again, from my practice perspective, the work product is striking. I have reports in my office that are 35 pages single-spaced that have been prepared by these folks. I think, again, if we don't do something, if this committee will not, well, I should choose my words carefully, that if something is not done, gradually we're going to see a diminishment in particularly younger folks, psychologists coming into this area. And what you'll have is some significant impediment to not only the court system, but the folks who are mentally ill. And would hope the committee will give consideration to this. Again, there has not been a significant increase in the provided compensation for approximately 20 years, or almost 20 years.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I guess I got two questions. One is of Senator Westlin. In light of the amendment we just made to change navigator, and with Dr. Kenning's follow-up comment that examiner might be the more accurate term, any suggestions, Senator Westlin, on how you'd like the language in the bill to proceed?
Mr. Cohen informs me that we shouldn't change it to examiner, correct?
Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Chair, historically, the Supreme Court budget has talked about psychological services. The committee could certainly change it to examiners, which is more encompassing, but I think the court generally has to use the phrase psychologist or psychological services.
Do you know, are they all psychologists that are providing this service, or are some of them psychiatrists?
As Dr. Kenning has indicated, there are a handful of psychiatrists who are doing the same.
So the intent, members, is to lay this bill over for possible inclusion. There is a appropriation requested as well, so it'll be considered as part of our budget bill. Let me ask, and so at some point, maybe Senator Westlin or stakeholders can can decide how to approach that. Or maybe we throw a little definition in there to make sure that everything's appropriately covered. But my other question has to do with the limiting language or the guidance language that's included in here for the appropriation in terms of its distribution among the judicial districts based on population and what the court ought to consider in addition to population. Actually, I'm looking at this. It says the amount given must be based on population, but then it adds additional considerations which could theoretically contradict the must requirement in line 7. And then there's a whole question of whether or not the legislature can put these kind of parameters around how the judicial branch would distribute funds for use among the examiner services. Any thoughts on either of those questions, Senator Westlin?
I have no thoughts.
Either of the testifiers have any input on that? Mr. Cohen?
Mr. Chair, I would defer to the chair in this case. I know in the past, from my past experience here, that at times with the court budget we've used a variation of either must and may. I don't think it's been one or the other on a continuing basis.
Yeah, well, we'll evaluate this, of course, but, on line 8, it says, in distributing the funds, the Supreme Court may also consider, which theoretically, taking those additional criteria into consideration would change a population-based distribution, even though line 7 mandates that the distribution be based on population. So we'd have to resolve that internal contradiction in the language to the extent we are able to give guidance or requirements to the courts in their distribution in the first place, which we have. I think we've done it in the past, but we'd have to take a look. I'm just sensitive because we've received pushback from the courts as to what the legislature can do in terms of how we distribute funds to them. But as to the concept of providing funding specifically for this line in the judicial budget, is there any further discussion from members of the committee? I'm not seeing any. Anything further you'd like, Senator Westlin, from you or either of the testifiers?
Mr. Chair, no, I appreciate the testimony today. As noted, this is an important adjunct service in our court system, and we do want to make sure we are able to provide, pay for these really very important services to ensure that the courts have the best information in making very serious decisions. And if there's any fine-tuning that needs to be done at all on the must and the may, we can certainly continue to work on that.
Thank you. And I will simply add, in my practice, mostly in the criminal context with Rule 20 evaluations, I've seen the work product. It's detailed, it's thorough. It involves review of frequently voluminous medical records, as well as all sorts of other information. And I will further note, my understanding is that in the Department of Human Services, comparably qualified examiners are paid somewhere in the nature of $100 an hour more than those who are doing the work within the judicial branch, which is also a serious inequity.
Yeah.
I deeply appreciate the work that is done within the judicial branch on these matters as well. So at this point, then, I think that's about all we can do today.
So,
Mr. Cohen.
Mr.
I almost
Chair,
called you Senator Cohen. I'm used to that.
Well, that'd be former Senator Cohen, but
Yes.
that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Former Senator Cohen.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll follow up with the questions of language and get back to Senator Westlin and the chair.
Appreciate that very much. This time, Senate File 2861 is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I do think we skipped over potentially 2857, the guardian ad litem. And then I think the...
For you, Senator Westlin, that is up next. So members, that is being distributed. Senate File 2857 is before the committee. Guardian ad litem budget. All right, Senator Westlin. All right, members, we have the guardian ad litem budget presentation before us. The intent is to lay this over for possible inclusion in the judiciary budget bill. We have 10 minutes for testimony, questions, and discussion so we can stay on track. Senator Westlin, your introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 2857 is the Guardian Ad Litem Board's appropriation bill. Guardian ad litems, as you may know, are court-appointed guardians who advocate in the best interests of the child in both juvenile and family court proceedings. And here with me to testify is Tammy Baker-Olson.
Good morning, everyone.
Ms. Baker-Olson.
Thank you, Senator Westlin, Chair Latz, and committee members. My name is Tammy Baker-Olson. I am the State Program Administrator for the Guardian Ad Litem Program, which is governed by the board, State Board of Guardians Ad Litem. As many of you are aware, guardians ad litem are child advocates appointed by the court, and we are appointed to make best interest recommendations. We are mandated by both federal and state statute. We are here to conduct independent investigations of children in juvenile and family court cases involving abuse and neglect. Last year, guardians ad litem advocated for 12,000 children in 6,700 court cases and participated in over 30,000 court proceedings. Despite the essential nature of their work, guardians ad litem are paid significantly less than jobs requiring similar qualifications and responsibilities, starting at $23.12 an hour. Because of our inability to offer competitive wage increases, the Guardian ad litem program faces very high employee turnover rates, making it difficult to fill what are low-wage positions. Staffing challenges have caused delays in case assignments in some areas of the state, thereby delaying crucial decisions regarding child safety and stability. We currently have 137 cases unassigned, leaving 237 children without a court-appointed guardian ad litem. The current biennial base budget for the Guardian ad litem program is $45.63 million. The Guardian ad litem board at this time seeks $16,365,000 to fund an increase in employee compensation, along with unavoidable health insurance premium increases. An increase in operating funds, an additional increase in operating funds of $1 million annually was also requested, as well as $476,000 to grow and strengthen our volunteer program, specifically in the 4th Judicial District at this time. In closing, every year thousands of children depend on the expertise and dedication of Minnesota's Guardians ad litem. The impact of the Guardian ad litem program extends far beyond the courtroom. By advocating for children and holding the system accountable, Guardians ad litem play a pivotal role in breaking cycles of trauma and strengthening child well-being. This budget increase will no doubt improve retention and reduce turnover, which will eliminate cases waiting assignment and ensure continuous advocacy for children. At this time, I'd like to thank the committee again for your consideration and your service.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Westlin.
And I will just add, in my work as a family law attorney, the guardians ad litem are frequently, their priority really is in the juvenile process. And there are, in any event, a number of occasions in family court where there is literally a mandatory appointment that they can't fill because they just don't have enough guardians to manage the caseload. And so there are cases where there are credible allegations of abuse and other things in family court cases where we just simply can't the judges won't refer because they know that they just can't take on any more cases. And so this is an important part of our court process, and the guardians provide really, really valuable information to judges who are making very serious decisions regarding our kids.
Any questions or discussion from members of the committee on the guardian ad litem board proposed appropriation? Obviously, the numbers will be subject to us figuring out what we've got available as we go through our budget process. Any questions about the role of the guardian ad litem board or the appropriateness of their request? I'm not seeing any. So, this is a committee that's familiar with the work that the board does. Thank you, Ms. Baker-Olson. Senate File 2857 is laid on the table for, or laid over for possible inclusion. We're going to switch out here to Senator Oumou Verbeten at this time for this one bill, Senate File 1503. As Senator Oumou Verbeten is approaching, I'll just notify the committee that we are anticipating a lunch break around 12:30 to or 12:45-ish, so you can plan accordingly. Senator Oumou Verbeten, facility fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to just give you very brief context about the bill, and then I can explain the A2 amendment. And I'll be brief so that I can really yield to my testifier. But Senate File 1503 would eliminate facility fees. These fees allow healthcare systems to add on fees that are unrelated to the cost of care we receive. The bill would also require an annual report on facility fees. Hospitals would have to submit this information to MDH, who would in turn make the report available to the public. The bill has some enforcement mechanisms, which is why it's making this stop in Judiciary, and then the amendment has some clarification to that. So charging facility fees would be considered an unlawful business practice, which is enforced by the Attorney General. And then MDH could impose administration penalties for the failure to comply with the reporting requirements that are in the bill. So just clarifying those two items, and then it does remove the rulemaking in the bill, which is based on some feedback from stakeholders.
So members, the provision specifically within our jurisdiction is on page 3, lines 13 to 15. Relating to enforcement. Let's try to keep our conversation focused on that provision at this time. Thank you. Are you Ms. Finnegan?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Welcome to the committee. Go ahead and identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Melissa Finnegan, and since many of you do know me from my day job, I want to be clear that my efforts on this bill are purely personal and do not represent the position of my employer. But I do want to briefly share with you what inspired me to work with Senator Oumou Verbeten to develop this legislation. I have a 4-year-old little girl named Natalie, and since she learned to speak, Natalie has been telling us that her tummy hurts. Her primary care provider referred us to a pediatric gastroenterologist, and they ruled out everything scary, but they did recommend regular 6-month follow-ups. As Natalie grows and her language develops, we're hoping she can explain more about what she's feeling so we can understand how to help her. Last April, when Natalie was 3, my husband took her to one of these follow-up appointments at the mHealth Fairview Voyager Pediatric Specialty Clinic. The clinic took her vital signs, and then Natalie played with cars on the floor while Patrick talked to the doctor, discussed her medication, eating habits, etc. It was a basic appointment that lasted about 15 minutes. So we were quite surprised when the bill came. We had a $201 charge for the doctor's services, but the bill also included a charge of $423 for outpatient hospital services. And we were confused because our child never set foot inside a hospital for this appointment. After several rounds of customer service calls to both our health insurance and mHealth Fairview, we learned that this charge was a facility fee that mHealth Fairview was allowed to charge us because the clinic was affiliated with a hospital. No extra care or services were provided for this fee, and the clinic is not physically located within the hospital. So I looked into current state law surrounding facility fees and discovered Minnesota Statute 62J.824 that requires facilities to notify patients in advance of an appointment that they may be charged a facility fee, resulting in a higher out-of-pocket expense. I'll note that this applies to telehealth appointments as well, so you don't even have to set foot in a facility to be charged this fee. Paragraph B of that same statute requires the facility to post that information on their website and in spaces accessible by patients. Looking at the advance notification requirement, I asked mHealth Fairview to document when we were notified of the possibility of being charged this fee. They could not. And after several rounds of asking, they admitted that they view the sign at the facility as the notification. I will challenge anyone who has gotten a 3-year-old ready for an appointment into their car seat, driven them across town, gotten them out of their car seat, and led them through a parking lot to notice a sign, when at that point you're probably already late for the appointment, and then call their insurance company to see if they may be charged a fee of an unknown amount. Additionally, a complicated sign in English at a facility is not adequate notification for anyone who is visually impaired or who does not read English. And I believe there's a photo of this sign in your packet. We pursued a number of avenues under current law to get this fee addressed. Appeals to mHealth Fairview and our insurance were unsuccessful. We contacted the Minnesota AG's office about enforcement of the notification requirement in current law, and while they understood our problem, they were unable to help us. We talked to an attorney about pursuing private action, but the attorney fees would more than exceed the cost of the original facility fee. That is why it is so important to me that we have clear enforcement mechanism for this proposed legislation, so that if clinics do continue to charge this exorbitant fee, Minnesotans have a practical path of redress. But ultimately, it appears to me that these facility fees are another way for Minnesotans to be price gouged out of getting the health care they need, and current law offers inadequate protection. My family is privileged enough that we were able to absorb a surprise $400 fee, but we know that not all Minnesota families can. So that is why Patrick and I reached out to our state legislators about pursuing legislation to stop this practice from harming Minnesota families who are just trying to get the health care that they need. Thank you, and I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you for your testimony today. Senator Oumou Verbeten. I have someone available from MDH to answer questions, is indicated here. Can you tell us about the amendment that is proposed here?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So again, the amendment is focused on the enforcement section of the bill. So there's banning the facility fees, or if they were to continue charging them, that would be an unlawful business practice. So it's clarifying that that portion of the bill is enforced by the Attorney General, whereas the reporting requirements that are in the bill are enforced by MDH. And then it removes the rulemaking, which was requested and a result of feedback from stakeholders.
And Senator, it looks like there are a couple of amendments outside of the enforcement section. Are they technical amendments on page 2 and page 3, deleting subdivision 5 is not technical, but might change the route of the bill?
Mr. Chair,
Senator
so subdivision 5 was the rulemaking that MDH had, which again, there were concerns about that creating too much authority for them to ban sort of additional fees. So we're taking that out of the bill, and then the earlier lines on page 2 are a reference to that rulemaking. And I've cleared this with Chair Wickland as well.
So Senator Wickland, Chair Wickland is okay if we make that amendment here in this committee, is what you're saying?
Yes.
All right. Any discussion on the A2 amendment from members of the committee? Not seeing any. Senator Oumou Verbeten moves adoption of the A2 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Is there any discussion on the bill as amended? Members, the intent is to move this back to Health and Human Services Committee. Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This, I think, is related to the enforcement provisions, at least insofar as it's going to be enforced by the AG under this provision. The Hospital Association briefly pulled me aside and said that they believe that your bill is in direct conflict with federal regulations, and that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, 42 CFR Part 413, in repeated places require them to bill this way. So I guess I haven't had time to research it. I'm not gonna get into that. So I guess my question is just, have you had that conversations with the Hospital Association, and do you have any, have you done any legal analysis to determine whether their position is accurate or inaccurate?
Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kroon, I have had conversations with the Hospital Association, and I believe what they're referring to is that they have to separate out any billing for the physician separate from any other potential billing services. I think what this bill is doing is preventing them from essentially charging a junk fee. The way the facility fees work is you simply have to be affiliated with a hospital in order to be allowed to charge that fee. So this is at clinics, which normally wouldn't have those fees. I totally understand that at hospitals, where they are required to be open 24/7, they have a lot of larger costs that those fees may be necessary. But what's happening is at these clinics where people are going for routine services, like my constituent testified to, they're allowed to slap on the facility fee simply because it's affiliated with the hospital.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, they also claim that, these costs are going to have to get passed on in some other form if this bill passes. That's probably a discussion for a different committee, a little outside of our jurisdiction. So I won't get into that other than just say that, they're telling me that these are real costs. They're not junk fees, but again, that's a different committee, I suppose, that'll have that discussion. But I haven't had the time to do the legal research. I don't know if anybody's here from the Hospital Association, but I would hope that we do, at some point, take a look at the legal implications of this. And I hope we're not moving a bill forward that does contradict federal law, and we have the AG trying to enforce a provision in state law against hospitals for complying with federal law. I don't know if that is happening. I don't know if there's anybody here to testify. Full disclosure, I have not had time to do any of my own legal research on this, so I'm not prepared to engage in that debate. But if somebody else is here, I would certainly welcome that conversation.
Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone in the room that wants to or can answer that question? Welcome to come forward if you wish. Come on down. Ms. Krinky.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Mary Krinky, and I'm with the Minnesota Hospital Association. The outpatient rules for hospitals require the clinics that are owned and affiliated with a hospital has to separate how they bill for services. and Medicare requires that the physician component be billed under a professional fee component, and that all other services, whether that be for our staff, electronic health records, scheduling, the building, the maintenance, and everything else, is under what they call a facility fee. I don't love that term, but that's the way Medicare tells us to bill. And so I just want to be clear that this bill doesn't just apply to Medicare, it applies broadly to everything. And many of the other payers, commercial payers, follow the Medicare rules. And so this is the way, ever since the outpatient rules were passed by Congress, that we are billing according to the rules that we have.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Just one other piece that I wanted to add to this is that some other states have banned facility fees. There's been kind of some variation in how they've approached it, but Connecticut has banned all facility fees. Colorado's banned them for preventative care. Ohio has banned facility fees for telehealth services. Texas has banned facility fees for drive-through vaccination. So I'm not aware if any of those are being challenged right now, but there are other states that have taken action on facility fees.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Oumou Verbeten. I spoke to some of the hospitals in my district, and this is narrower than I was led to believe, that since it's just applying to clinics, but I think you need to be very specific about that, because otherwise, I mean, it is true that facility fees do cover a wide range of services, not just the building itself. And we have such a messed up healthcare system that I'm, kind of uncomfortable with trying to mess around with it when, like Senator Kroon, we don't really understand what we're doing. So hopefully it's going back to the Health Committee to figure it out. But I certainly empathize with you. I think I did a recent similar thing that took about 15 minutes, and my health coverage covered most of it, but it was very high.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Senator Pappas. I just wanted to make sure that committee members see that in section 1 of the bill, subdivision 2, it does read that they're prohibited from charging, billing, or collecting facility fee for non-emergency services provided at a provider-based clinic.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Ms.
there's another provision in the bill that says hospitals would not be allowed to bill for what's called evaluation and management services. It's an outright prohibition on billing codes for evaluation and management. It's called E&M. That is the most common code billed for hospital emergency rooms. And a lot of people don't realize, but hospital emergency rooms are considered outpatient because the patient has not been admitted to the hospital. So under the current language in the bill, hospitals would not be able to bill for much of any of their emergency room services.
So members, I think we're going to move on from the general discussion about this. Now we probably all can share stories of concerns about medical bills and whether or not certain things were covered by insurance and whether there was appropriate notice. Thank you, Ms. Krinke. The question specifically before us right now is whether the Attorney General's office should have enforcement authority and in the manner in which that gets described. So I personally am comfortable, if it's lawful to enforce and prohibit, to have the Attorney General's office as the enforcement entity and the others as listed here in subdivision 6. The broader question, we're a little better educated, and we can consider that when it comes before us for another vote some point later in the proceedings. Of course, members can decide how to vote today based on whatever criteria they wish to use. At this time, let's see, we've adopted the amendment, right? So Senator Oumou Verbeten moves that Senate File 1503 as amended be recommended to pass and be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. All right, members, next up, Senator Pappas, Senate File 1995. Senator Pappas, when you're ready, go ahead and describe the bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 1995 is a simple bill to help the fire suppression industry, their customers, and the State Fire Marshal Division. The bill in front of you transfers funding from the general fund to the State Fire Marshal Division Fund to increase fire protection staffing in the State Fire Marshal Division, reduce turnaround times on sprinkler plan reviews, and also increase timely inspections. There are currently over 40 projects waiting for an initial review and an additional 15 waiting for their second review. This will move the fee revenue received from sprinkler permits, license certificates, and fines, identical to the Department of Labor and Industry, from the State General Fund into a dedicated account to be used solely to operate the State Fire Marshal Fire Protection Program. With me today is John Nissia, representing the Minnesota chapter of the National Fire Sprinkler Association, to testify and explain more about the bill.
Thank you. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Nissia. I'm with the National Fire Sprinkler Association. Prior to coming to the National Fire Sprinkler Association in 2022, I spent 33 years with an incredible career in the Minnesota State Fire Marshal Division. The last half of that career was supervising this fire protection program. So I'm intimately familiar with the workings of that program. So currently, as an employee of the National Fire Sprinkler Association, we represent about 16 fire sprinkler contractors in the state of Minnesota that employ hundreds of people that install, design, and sell fire sprinkler systems. So in the late 1980s, early 1990s, the fire sprinkler contractors put together a piece of legislation that passed that sought to have professional credentials very similar to electricians, plumbers, and some of the other construction trades. That passed in 1992 and is known as the Fire Protection Industry Licensing Law. The laws and rules were crafted with the intent that the fees generated by the program would cover the costs of that program. For reasons that I'll not discuss here due to time, the fees were diverted to other needs at that time. So what the Senate File 1995 does is establishes a special revenue fund for those fees collected to restore the funding to the original intent of the legislation. Currently, the State Fire Marshal Fire Protection Team has a staff of 5 people. The original fiscal note called for 7 personnel, full-time staff equivalents. That has never been fulfilled or recognized. Over the last 15 years, the State Fire Marshal Division has averaged somewhere between 400 and 425 plan reviews annually. When divided by the 3 plan review staff, that equals 133 to 140 plan reviews per person each year. That's an incredibly high workload. Typical sprinkler plan reviews take somewhere around 5 to 6, maybe 7 hours, although the larger, more complex reviews can take days or in some unique cases even weeks to perform. Effective fire protection requires that these critical fire and life safety systems be properly designed, correctly installed, adequately maintained, and that the design and installation be reviewed and inspected to identify potential problems. Fire sprinkler systems are the most effective method of limiting fire spread in a building fire, with a success rate of over 90%. The state building code requires that rough-in inspections be conducted before the system components are covered up by construction. They also require a final inspection at the time of completion. Due to workload concerns, the State Fire Marshal's Office is rarely able to go out and do those 2 mandated inspections. Historically, the State Fire Marshal has only been staffed for conducting the plan reviews for the initial review and performing a very limited number of inspections, typically on request. As you probably know, the construction industry moves at a very, very fast pace right now. While there can be significant planning in some larger construction projects, remodeling or renovation projects are often occurring very rapidly. Often the sprinkler contractor must move at a very fast pace to design, obtain the parts, and actually get the system installed in an effort to keep the project on time. Contractors and building owners prefer that the instruction notices be made in writing as soon as possible so that corrections can be made before the system gets installed, where they become much more costly and time-consuming to fix. So passage of Senate File 1995 would accomplish the original intent of the funding, would also establish consistency with other state regulatory agencies. For example, the Department of Labor and Industry gets to keep their funds for professional licensing and certification programs through a special revenue account. This would reduce the plan review time with a goal of 2 weeks. This in turn assists the construction industry as a whole with fewer delays. Also provides resources to investigate violations of that fire protection licensing law, and provides training for sprinkler contractors, installers, designers, and local code enforcement personnel. Allows for more complete on-site inspections, and that ultimately will improve the reliability of these critical fire and life safety systems for the purposes of public safety. Again, request your support on this, and thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in front of your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Is it Nischa?
Yes.
I pronounce that properly? So the implication I'm trying to figure out here is whether there's some connection between taking income from fees and penalties out of the general fund and setting it aside into a special revenue account, which would then make it pretty much inaccessible for general fund needs. Is there some connection between the fees and penalties money and the specific services that are proposed to be funded through this special revenue account?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question. Yeah, maybe if you can rephrase that. I'm not.
Well, I mean, everyone would like to have a dedicated account to fund their particular service or program, right? If we threw open the door and you know, everyone would come in here and say, yeah, I want one too. All right, so for me, there's got to be some specific connection between the source of the revenue for that account and the expenditures that are going out for it, and have a good reason for walling it off to the extent that we do in statute, taking out of the general fund. There are lots of fees and penalties that come into the general fund, and then we allocate money as we have available and perceive the needs of any individual service or program from the general fund. So why wall this off? Other than the reference back to the original intention or concept, because we're well past that point now. So either you or Senator Pappas or someone else can help me understand that. Senator Pappas.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the fee is for a sprinkler permit, and then the reality is they're approving the permit, and that's why the fee was initiated. So there's a direct connection between fire suppression efforts and the sprinkler fee.
And Senator Pappas, the penalties also are connected to the sprinkler permit violations?
I'm sorry, for some reason I don't have the bill in my packet. Someone wants to grab the bill from me. Yeah, my understanding is the penalty is if you don't install the sprinkler when the fire marshal goes to inspect. So I believe that's the case, isn't it, Mr. Ninja?
Yes.
Mr. Nischa.
Mr. Chair, the majority of the money that comes in is from fees. The fines are a very, very, very small part. We're talking hundreds, maybe $1,000 a year is all that's brought in from fines themselves. So it's a very small part. The fines are generally when you catch somebody doing something wrong or doing something without the proper licensing or credentials to do it.
Thank you for that. And are the projected revenues from the fees and penalties Well, it sounds like what you're telling me is the services right now are underfunded by the general fund in terms of meeting the needs.
That is correct,
So,
Mr. Chair.
are you intending then, where does the level of income from the fees and penalties compare to what your projection of the needs are?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, all sources of revenue for that average somewhere around $600,000 per year, looking at the last 3 years.
And what is the appropriation for the service? The current base?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I don't have those numbers. I don't work for the agency anymore, so I don't know what their internal appropriation is for it.
I mean, the question I'm asking really is, would this overfund or underfund what is projected to be the need to cover the amount of services that you think need to be? I mean, I'm reluctant to get in a position where we start accumulating funds in an account that aren't needed for the purpose of that account.
Mr. Chair, again, I'm somewhat removed from, being with the state agency, but putting 7 full-time staff on would roughly be about $700,000, so it would be at the high end of what the revenue has been. It would still, the staffing costs would still need to be subsidized to some degree out of the state fire marshal budget to cover that.
Mr. Chairman, for some reason, we don't have a fiscal note. Maybe I didn't request it, or maybe Mr. Turner can help us.
Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members, fiscal note's been requested, but what we have in front of us, which presumably will be reflected in the fiscal note, is it looks like an average of about $600,000 a year in fees and penalties, but then in 2025 it goes down to $125,000. One of the problems would be that this fee would be fluctuating, and the money supposedly would be paying for a constant cost. A second concern is that the fire marshal is already a special revenue funded agency. It's funded by the fire safety account, not the general fund. This bill, actually, I think that if it goes into the bill, it should be rewritten where the penalties and fees will accumulate during the year in the state fire marshal account and then be annually appropriated. But that doesn't solve the problem that the fees will fluctuate, and it's hard to fund, say, 7 FTEs on a fluctuating fee source.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Nishcha.
If I could just clarify that the number for 2025 is only a year-to-date that represents the first 2 months.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Mr. Turner, okay. Well, either way, we probably have a somewhat fluctuating revenue source there.
It is, Mr. Chairman, it is very much
Mr.
tied to
Nishcha.
the construction industry, which does fluctuate up and down.
Right. Okay. Well, when we get to the point of figuring out our appropriations, our budget bill, we'll have to sort through this, make some decisions. So this is helpful to have the conversation today. Anything else you'd like to add before we lay this bill over?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for the time.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Howe.
Being directly involved in the construction industry and actually having worked with the testifier, John Nishcha, numerous times, the sprinkler review and the sprinkler inspection has really, in the last couple of years, really been troublesome. We have had huge delays in the sprinkler review process because of the undermanning, the understaffing. We have actually had to allow buildings to be occupied prior to the sprinkler review actually being received. and which has caused us issues of having to go back and relook at the system.
Oops, where'd he go?
We seem to have had a technical difficulty with Senator Howe. But we're not going to read anything more into it than just technical difficulties. But the impression I get is that he was saying basically that this service is underfunded, needs additional resources. So we appreciate that, and we'll certainly evaluate that when we get to the budget appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Senate File 1995 is laid over for possible inclusion. Members, lunch has arrived. We're going to take a 30-minute recess. If you have any papers that you no longer wish to keep from the committee process so far, please put it on your chair, and staff will recycle that paper. We will be in recess until 1 p.m. Thank you.